What's going on out there, everybody? It is Tuesday, the morning after Monday Night Football, and we're here to break it down, talk to you about some buy and sells, some exciting stuff, some bummer stuff. I'm Jen Piacenti here, and I'm joined by John Impemba. What's going on, John Impemba?
I'm doing pretty well, Jen. I mean, like I said, we're coming off a week one, a successful week one in terms of being able to get back to actually watching some football, which was fantastic. Just sit on your couch, have a whole Sunday of games. Then last night you had the doubleheader Monday Night Football, which is always a nice little treat as well. So by and large, everything went pretty well, and I'm just excited to get into week two.
I mean, I have to ask, John Impemba, since you're well known as being the chef, do you mix up your meals and your snacks based on what day of the week the games are? Like, is Sunday completely different from Thursday, completely different from Monday? How do you do your menu?
You know, it's usually generally just by what I'm craving for that day. So we did do like some boneless wings on Sunday because I'm more of the boneless fan than the bone-in. So we had a nice spread of boneless wings. To watch the Patriots, watch Cam Newton score his 2 touchdowns and lead them to a victory. And then on Monday last night, we actually made some dinner. So I just basically ate dinner while watching the game. We had chicken pot pie. Can't hate chicken pot pie. So, all about that.
It's already chicken pot pie whether you are because you're in New England. I think
it was. Yeah, it's funny that it gets like cold now, but it's still like 60. But I'm used to 90, so my body is telling me that it's basically cold. But yeah, we're basically fall here. We're mid-September, so
that's fair.
Apple picking season. It's all here.
Still really hot in California. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about last night's games a little bit. I think no surprise that Pittsburgh came out on top of New York. Any takeaways here? One thing I thought was interesting is it seems like Darius Slayton is the target that Daniel Jones likes the best. I was pretty happy to see that. I got him in a lot of drafts, got him pretty late. But a little surprised that Sterling Shepard wasn't more used. Saquon was held, by that Pittsburgh defense. Performing as expected, perhaps better. So what were your key takeaways from last night?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they couldn't get him, what do you have, 8 yards on 16 carries or something absolutely crazy. It was good to see him at least get involved in the passing attack. But this was one of the reasons why I was actually in leagues where I had the number 2 pick. And I was taking a little bit of flack for this. I was taking Zeke Elliott over Saquon Barkley if I had the number 2 pick because I didn't like the start of the season that the Giants had on their schedule. They had Pittsburgh, they have San Francisco, they have Chicago coming up. And I just had worries about the offensive line. I had worries about the Giants' ability to compete in some games. They didn't have a high Vegas win total. And then that tough start to the schedule. So I felt slightly vindicated to see Zeke have the game that he had. And then Saquon, couldn't get double-digit rushing yards. The Slayton takeaway, you're right. I played him in DFS, but I didn't really take any of them in seasonal. I was more on the idea that a healthy Sterling Shepard would be the guy on the outside there. Evan Ingram, I figured when he was healthy, he would be a strong candidate. He still had 7 targets, but couldn't do anything with them. Again, tough defense there, but it was good to see Slayton really get off to a strong start and basically follow up that rookie campaign. I would say maybe another takeaway I had, and this is once the Connor injury came about. And obviously Benny Snell had a lot of camp hype, came in, played really well. But Jalen Samuels only got 1 target, and you kind of figure that, if they were going to involve, Samuels a little bit more in the passing game, once Connor, maybe wasn't involved, but to see him, not really being involved in the game plan, it makes me wonder what his potential fantasy upside would be. Should Connor miss extended time? They're saying it's just an ankle sprain. The quote by Tomlin was they're going to leave the light on for him this week. So I guess we'll have to see exactly how that goes.
We're going to the Motel 6 with James Conner?
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll leave the light on for you, JC. No, but really, I hope everything's fine with James Conner. I actually only have 1 share of James Conner, even though I absolutely adore him and think he can have a great season. But because of this injury thing, I didn't want to overexpose myself. And I do have Benny Snell in some leagues as a late pick in case this happens. So obviously we'll talk more about waiver claims next, but I wanted to also ask you your impressions of Daniel Jones. So, of course, Daniel Jones taking a lot of heat. Giants fans are pretty rough, as New York fans are. I actually felt like, did we really expect much more than that from Daniel Jones in this game versus that tough defense? I mean, look what happened to Saquon. Sure, he made some poor decisions, but he also did some really exciting stuff. He's a sophomore quarterback. So, overreaction Tuesday. Are we selling Saquon And are we selling Daniel Jones? What do you think?
Oh, man, the fantasy on Twitter has been blowing up today with people about trade offers involving Saquon Barkley, and I honestly don't understand. You just recently took him with probably the second, maybe the first overall pick, and now all of a sudden you're ready to bail out on a guy. I mean, he still got you double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, despite the fact that he had 8 yards rushing. It makes no sense to sell Saquon just yet. And even then, it would take a lot more for me to be convinced you have to move on from him, more than especially one game. The Daniel Jones thing, I thought he performed actually pretty well. People are upset about the interception that he threw there, and I think that is growing pains in a young quarterback. I was talking to James Grande about this last night while we were watching the game because he's a big Giants fan. That interception, a veteran quarterback more likely is throwing that in the stands and going back and taking the next down to get another play. Instead, he tried to do a little bit more of it, ends up getting his arm hit, throws the pick, turns it over, and they don't get any points out of it. I also question the play calling in that situation. You have Saquon Barkley, you're on the 3-yard line, you only hand it to him one time. I run that ball 4 times. If he doesn't score, you turn the ball over, and now Pittsburgh has the ball on the 1, and you make them go 90 yards on your defense to score. So I sometimes question the play calling that some of these coaches have when they have those power backs. Like how often do you think Saquon Barkley is able to get stuffed on 4 straight carries up the middle? It doesn't seem like a very likely feat. So I was a little surprised there, but I'm not giving up on Daniel Jones. I thought he was fine. I liked also the validation we got on Deontay Johnson. He led the team in targets. I think he had 10 targets there. He got off to a little bit of a slow start, had some drops, but he had the fumble obviously on the opening punt there. But I mean, he came back in a strong way, and then obviously Juju looked really good as well.
Yeah, I was excited about that. I have some Juju. But what about James Washington? He's the guy that got in the end zone. So should we panic and say, no, James Washington's the guy to own? Or are we still sticking with Deontay?
No, you should definitely still stick with Deontay because of the volume that he received. I liked James Washington. I took him in a lot of best balls as one of my last picks because he was a guy that proved last year as well that he could be a deep threat. We know Ben Ted usually likes to throw the ball deep. The offense didn't look as great initially, but as the game moved on, I feel like Roethlisberger got more comfortable. Is Washington going to be a guy that's going to maybe see more than 4 or 5 targets a game? Probably not. I think you're going to see a lot of Juju and Deontay just based off this week 1 matchup. But, if you're looking for, home run threat, maybe in DFS, Washington could be a guy that's going to probably have like 1 or 2% ownership.
All right, let's jump over to the next game. Tennessee and Denver. So the biggest news coming out of this is, unfortunately for you and I, John Impemba, who have a lot of Philip Lindsay, it looks like he has what they've now diagnosed as turf toe. Could be 3 to 8 weeks out. So for Melvin Gordon owners, congratulations to you. You finally do get probably the main back. And for us Philip Lindsay owners, kind of a bummer. Are you cutting Philip Lindsay? Is it worth holding on to him?
So, my early reaction was to let him go because turf toe isn't something that seems to really just go away, right? It's something that kind of lingers around. And like you said, if they're already expecting him to miss a handful of weeks, if you don't have an IR spot, he's at best already in a timeshare. It's not like he's the guy that's going to come back and reclaim the starting job. So, I think if you're a Philip Lindsay owner and you don't have an IR spot, you're probably going to have to let him go at this point.
Kind of a bummer. I hate it.
It's tough for those who went 0 RB this year. If you think about it, like Marlon Mack in the 9th or 10th round, Philip Lindsay in the 8th or 9th round. Now both of those guys max out. Lindsay's hurt. If you try to go 0 RB strategy this year, the top 2 guys who are probably targeting are already out.
Yeah, pretty much a bummer. Probably didn't work out yet. But you can maybe still go get Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. Well, not Jonathan Taylor, but you might be able to still get Nyheim Hines on the waiver wire, which we'll get to in a moment. Let's talk about Noah Fant. Noah Fant, great game. Do you think that's going to continue when Courtland Sutton returns? I mean, we had high hopes for Fant. I think a lot of us did, but this was a little bit more than even we expected.
Yeah, Fant actually had like a pretty good rookie season, all things considered. We don't expect much out of rookie tight ends, and then he went ahead and I think he had 560 yards or something like that as a rookie.
Led in yards per catch for tight ends, I think. Or he had a bunch of stats that were actually really impressive.
I was pretty bullish on him coming in this year because, again, where you were getting him in drafts, I thought was a very easy tight end, too, to draft. and give you that upside. Yeah, I think he was obviously helped by, Cortland Sutton not being there, but it's hard to take away his performance, 5 for 81 and a score. I think you'll see him being one of the top 2 to 3 targets on this offense. Anyways, Sutton will obviously be the number one. We'll see exactly what happens with Jerry Jeudy once Sutton comes back. I mean, Jeudy looked good. He was targeted, but he had 2 big drops. He's supposed to have really great hands. I'm not going to hold that against him. We'll have to wait and see if he becomes a trend. But he could have had a much bigger night. I mean, he is an incredible route runner. They kept on highlighting that fact during that game where he was just putting the Titans defenders basically in boxes while his feet work was getting them open. So
best route runner in the draft. I mean, no question about it.
Yeah, so excited for the prospects there, and I think Drew Lock maybe now has a little bit more upside, even though the offense itself didn't really explode last night.
Right. Yeah, but you know what? First time. I mean, the one thing about that team to me is there's just so many moving parts, so many young players that I thought it was going to take a few weeks to click. But once it does click, about halfway through the season, could be really formidable. I thought it was exciting. Now on the other side of the ball, a lot of interesting things. A.J. Brown and Corey Davis shared the exact same amount of targets with 8, but Corey Davis is the one that actually turned it into something. So, I think we've been saying for years, if Corey Davis were healthy. So certainly for, DFS or something, he's healthy now. Is it worth grabbing Corey Davis? And should we be concerned about A.J. Brown? Obviously, he's more of a deep threat. He dropped that ball at the end. I don't think so. But what are your initial reactions to that division of labor?
Yeah, I'm not ready to buy into Corey Davis quite yet. Again, I feel like we've just been hurt too many times here buying into the potential talent, right? I mean, but yeah, I mean, it was hard. Again, the Denver secondary is very inexperienced. Technically their best cornerback, AJ Bouye, he ended up getting hurt in that game too, which really made the secondary even weaker. But Davis was having a pretty good game at that time anyways. I was not one to really target AJ Brown this year in drafts. I felt last year he was very boom or bust. I thought his targets were very up and down. And this is an offense that likes to run the football a ton. Now, the stat line yesterday was pretty interesting. I obviously haven't been able to fact check this or not, but you had 31 carries from Derrick Henry, but you also had 43 pass attempts from Ryan Tannehill. How often do you see a concentrated volume there of carries to one running back and then 43 pass attempts also in a game? Seems pretty high. I don't know how often we can think Ryan Tannehill's going to be throwing that much in games, but so I'm not really buying into either of them. I wasn't really high on Brown anyways because of the inconsistencies last season. But again, something to watch. Corey Davis is going to be added off waivers this year. So if you have maybe a Mecole Hardman, who I was not high on, and you played 29% of the offensive snaps week 1, he's basically only there to be an insurance policy on Tyreek Hill. Maybe you cut to, Mecole Hardman and pick up Corey Davis this week, and you make that swap, as a bench. Yeah. But I'm not dropping a guy to all of a sudden think Corey Davis is going to be my wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 every week.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's more of a bench stash right now, and we see what happens. But I do think that we're underselling Ryan Tannehill, and I'm tired of sleeping on. I'm just going to say this.
Well, we had this debate. You were a Tannehill guy. I was Cam Newton.
We got us, and they're both winners in my opinion. Yep. Obviously, Cam Newton more fantasy points this week, but we're now talking about Tannehill's thrown for a minimum of 2 touchdowns now in 8 games in a row. So we think about it as just a running game, but the guy's really good and he doesn't really make mistakes. He completed 29 passes, like you said, last night. So I just think that Tannehill is underrated, and I think he's flying under the radar. And next week they're facing Jacksonville. Right. I don't see why you don't stack up some Titans. He's a great price on both FanDuel and DraftKings, which I'll get into later in a video. But guys, stop sleeping on Ryan Tannehill. I think he finishes the number 16 quarterback in standard leagues this week, something like that. So he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and that ends up adding up, especially in leagues where you get penalized for interceptions and sacks and things and such.
Yeah, the offense is certainly set up to help them succeed because defenses have to play the run. If they go nickel defense to stop a pass, Derrick Henry's going to plow over all those safeties and cornerbacks that they have out there. So the offense is certainly set up to success. We saw Jonnu Smith get in the end zone there. And there's some big things potentially coming from him as a pass catching tight end to help that offense as well. So healthy Adam Humphries was making plays. I think Humphries being healthy could be a nice little safety blanket there for Tannehill as well. So yeah, the passing offense could be a little bit more overlooked, by some at the beginning of the year. But if Tannehill is able to continue, like you said, the progression he showed at the end of last year and carry it through, Tennessee is obviously going to be a contender, but that passing offense will really make them dynamic.
Yeah, so it'll be fun to see. All right, now let's get to the heart of the order. Some of you have already lost some big players. I doubt anybody was super counting on Marlon Mack, but so many of you were so excited about Jonathan Taylor, and it looks like you are going to get your Christmas present early because Frank Reich did just come right out and say he's going to be the number one guy. Now, I think the most interesting observation from Sunday was not just that Jonathan Taylor looked pretty good, but really more that he got targets. He got 6 targets. He caught all 6 of them. So this idea that he's not a running back that can catch, that goes away. Now, Nyheim Hines was the one that actually got the 2 touchdowns. Yeah. There were 17 targets sent by way of running back from Phillip Rivers. Now, when we look at Phillip Rivers, look at what happened with Phillip Rivers and Austin Ekeler last year. That gets me excited for the 2 running backs in Indianapolis, and especially when I'm looking at DFS, and especially on DraftKings, which is full point PPR, I like both these guys. And if you can go out and get Nyheim Hines, yes, Jonathan Taylor is the main guy, but you can't get him anymore. He's gone. Nyheim Hines you might be able to get. What is your feeling on this, John, and how much would you spend on Nyheim Hines for your fab budget? What percentage of fab would you spend?
If you're in PPR leagues, I think I would go 25% on Hines here. Again, like he's not going to dominate the touches. I know he got 7 carries. There's only 2 less than Taylor, but I think going forward, you're going to see Taylor probably get 15 to 20.
Right.
Hines may never see more than 10. But you're not lying about his ability, Rivers' love for throwing the football to the running backs. Just in this game, as you mentioned, Taylor had 6 targets, Hines had 8, and Mack had 3 in the limited time that he was in there. So, you're looking at 17 targets or so there to the running back position. And it was funny because earlier this year, when they had Mack and they had Jonathan Taylor, Frank Reich said, I could see games where Nyheim Hines has like 10 catches, and everybody sort of scoffed and laughed. It's like, how is Hines going to see the field with all of these? Well, it's because Phillip Rivers loves checking down and throwing to these running backs. So, Hines is definitely going to have more fantasy value. And if he gets red zone work too, for whatever reason, if they want to go into sort of these, hybrid roles where Hines and Taylor are on the field at the same time, that's only going to increase his value. So I wouldn't go too over the board. Because he's never going to be that early down runner. But pass catching PPR leagues, go ahead, 25% if you need.
That's what I'm thinking. PPR. He had a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown last Sunday. So, there's a lot of possibility there, and he's well priced on the DFS slates on both sides too. Right. Now, over in Pittsburgh, obviously we touched on this. It looks like Connor may be injured. They're saying it's an ankle. Could this? They say
he tried to go back and play too, and then it just didn't work. I think it was a combination of it still wasn't feeling right, and then Benny Snell was just ripping. Yeah, and Benny Snell was just ripping runs. So it's like, all right, well, we don't really need to risk Connor here. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't panic yet, guys. James Conner owners, don't freak out. I understand why, but keep an eye on him. He still has the potential to be the main back there. But it was really exciting to see Benny Snell. How much would you spend on Benny Snell for a fab bid?
If I'm a Connor owner, I'm going to have to go 40%, I think, minimum, just because you're going to want that insurance. Plus, I do worry a little bit now. The likelihood of a re-injury coming, with this ankle, issue. We know Connor has been a little bit injury prone, but also there was a lot of, positive talk about Benny Snell during camp. And if all of a sudden Connor goes down, Snell goes and runs for 100 yards, one of the 3 backs to do it in week 1. What happens when Connor comes back? Is this now more of a timeshare than it would have been originally? So I would definitely be investing in Benny Snell if he's on your waiver wire. If you own Connor, I think you probably have to go maybe even more than that, 50 or 60%, just to make sure you have that handcuff back.
Okay, answer me this. Malcolm Brown or Cam Akers?
So I'm still trusting Cam Akers. Even McVay came out and said, the idea was Akers, and then we gave Brown some situational touches and it worked out for him. And he gave this sort of convoluted answer to why Malcolm Brown ended up playing the way he did in the game flow, but he still liked Akers there. Long term, I still feel like Akers has to be the guy.
I do too.
But I was definitely a little bit discouraged to see, Brown start. I didn't think that we were going to see much of him. And then he run, train, and get 2 touchdowns. So, I'm still going to go Akers, but you have to at least throw some money at Brown if he's on the board there because, he's going to still get that early down work, I assume.
One interesting development, I don't know if it's cause for concern, but Austin Ekeler, 1 target. That is terrifying for Austin Ekeler owners. Obviously, they have Tyrod Taylor there now, different style of quarterback than Phillip Rivers. Decides to make plays a little more with his legs, I think is what's going on, instead of just checking down. But we will have a quarterback switch probably partway through the season. We don't know. So that might change it. But what is your level here? Like, is Joshua Kelly the guy now we need to own? Is this more related to Justin Jackson being injured? What do we do with this backfield in Los Angeles? Do we panic? Do we sell Austin Ekeler?
So it's not great to hear Anthony Lynn come out and say, they're changing sort of the style of offense with more rollouts, more mobility with Tyrod Taylor. That's going to eliminate the check down to Austin Ekeler because, if you drafted Austin Ekeler in the second round, it's because you thought he was going to get 80 targets or so in this offense, and to not even get 1 target, I think it was in week 1. Yeah, you're not. It's not what you're looking for out of that fantasy production there. They said they're going to work on. I think the quote was they're going to focus on getting him more looks or more touches this week. So we'll have to wait and see if that ends up being the case, and we can kind of breathe a sigh of relief. But for Joshua Kelly, I was on him very, very early. I kind of took a small little victory lap, quote tweeted myself from May when I tweeted out saying that we should all be looking at Kelly over Jackson. So I felt vindication there to see him get in the end zone. I loved early in camp. They were talking about how Kelly was part of their goal line packages. It was like, hey, if he's going to get red zone looks, that's going to certainly boost him up. Plus, we've seen Jackson over the last couple of years not very impressive. So I don't know why some people were still kind of bullish on him. To me, they drafted Kelly. It wasn't a hard job for him to overtake. The injury to Jackson opened the door. Kelly took advantage of it. I think that's sort of the last we're going to see of Jackson here.
So, John, speaking of victory laps, can we talk about one Baker Mayfield?
We can certainly talk about.
Yeah, can we?
Whatever he did.
I might get a little sick. Excuse me.
Yeah.
No, Baker Mayfield stinks. Hey, who knew? I told you. I told you guys. Browns are going to Brown. They're not any better.
He's not good. He's not good.
And unfortunately, guys who were all on OBJ, which is why I drafted 0 shares of OBJ, that affects OBJ. It's not that OBJ isn't talented. I don't think that he can do what he needs to do with Baker Mayfield under center. And I don't know what they're going to do to solve this. How do you feel now about OBJ?
So I'm actually still fine on OBJ. I was telling people, and again, I've been the biggest, Beckham proponent this year. Going into the season, I expected a bounce back year from him. But I was also telling everybody, this week sits. I don't love the matchup here against Baltimore. I didn't think him against Humphreys was going to be a great spot for him because, again, Baker Mayfield is an average at best quarterback, and the Ravens defense is pretty much as elite as it comes. So I was tempering my expectations, but I loved the 10 targets. 10 targets means that he had opportunities to catch the football. He didn't always complete the catches because the passes.
3. He only got 3 catches. That's the problem.
But I love the targets. The targets create
I like the targets too, but if you can't hit the broadside of a barn,
I think a lot of it had a lot more to do with the Ravens defense, but I appreciate the fact that he wasn't afraid to throw it to him. Now, if this week against Cincinnati, he comes out and has 3 catches on 10 targets,
then we have a problem.
I'm more concerned, then I'll worry because I'm expecting them to be able to score some points here against the Bengals. Because the one thing about Baker Mayfield, if you look at all of his game logs, and this is what I've been trying to tell some of those who are out there still trying to be Baker defenders, against bad teams, he looks great because he's not the worst quarterback in the NFL. He can beat bad defenses, but if you put any sort of pass rush on him, if you design coverages, he has trouble with that. and he's average. He's not a great quarterback, so he's not going to make the plays. But against bad teams, I think he can show out. He'll put up good numbers. So I am expecting a bounce back this week from Baker and the Browns crew, and hopefully my OBJ, because I do obviously have a lot of shares on him because I was riding on the bandwagon this year. Driving the bandwagon, not even riding.
You were, but you were also driving the bandwagon on David Johnson, and so far that's a winner.
That's a win, yeah.
I also want to mention I just lost my train of thought. I had something. Josh Jacobs. I want to talk about Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
Hey, guys. Josh Jacobs got targeted 6 times, I believe, for 4 catches. So besides the fact that he got into the end zone 3 times, and sure, it was versus, kind of a crummy defense, but it's clear they are going to use Josh Jacobs. No worries about Devontae Booker being there. Josh Jacobs is their guy. They love him. He succeeded. And the upside for your fantasy team is absolutely astronomical. I am so excited. Meanwhile, Miles Sanders, and we had this debate. Were you on the Miles Sanders or Josh Jacobs side? Because I feel like we've been having this debate for a few months now.
I have shares of both. It really was depending on where they were going in drafts. Right. And towards the end, like Sanders, early on rather, Sanders was going so early. Like, he was going, 8, 9 picks. And I was like, I wasn't taking him there. So I was getting Josh Jacobs and pick 14, 15. And I was all about it. Once Sanders started to fall back down in drafts, I was taking him a little bit more because Jacobs kind of bumped up there. But I mean, the fact that Jacob said he wanted to have 60 catches this year, and he came out right away and had 4 on 6 targets. I mean, looks like he's on that way.
It absolutely does. It's super exciting. Meanwhile, Boston Scott people, sorry about it.
Yeah, I mean, he got hurt. He came back. I mean, it was also, again, it was also kind of a, that offensive line. I was so against the Eagles this week. I mean, I felt like the defensive line of Washington could actually do some damage now that they have Chase Young there. And it seemed like they were really disrupting what was going on with Philadelphia there. So, I'm not ready to sell Boston Scott. I'm not really totally ready to sell him, but you would have obviously wanted. I think it's also unfair to expect Boston Scott to be Miles Sanders. Sanders is a much better player. So you had to also temper the expectations of what you were going to get out of Boston Scott. But obviously we were looking, maybe for a little bit more of him, especially in the passing game where last year, he was a really big part of it. In this game, he only had 2 targets. So, if he had 9 for 35 rushing, but he had 4 for 50 receiving, you'd be okay with it. But that's, wasn't what happened.
Let's stick with that Philly game for a second. There is a tight end that might still be on your waiver wire, and his name is Dallas Goddard. I have him as my tight end in one league, and I think he's going to stay there until that receiving crew gets better. It seems to be no problem for 2 tight ends to be fantasy relevant this year in Philadelphia. They're just beat up. I mean, Jalen Reagor was pretty exciting. I saw him get some, he had some blazing speed, but they just didn't really connect yet. Same with Deshaun Jackson. It looks like the tight ends with that terrible offensive line, they may be getting the ball a lot more than some of the deeper threats. What is your feeling on Dallas Goddard?
Yeah, I was okay with him again if you were taking him later in your drafts as your tight end too. I'm not going to sit here and say
$1 in an auction.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say we should be expecting 8 and 100 every week, obviously. But I mean, you're right. I think we could see him probably settle into 4 or 5 catches, maybe 40 to 60 yards. And then he'll have some games where he pops off. He was always kind of a red zone threat for them, even in years past. So maybe there's some touchdown upside. But I mean, Zach Ertz still got 7 targets here. It's not as if he Goddard all of a sudden was just overtaking the target share. He just was the more productive play of the day. So while nothing else really clicked, Greg Ward 5 on 7 targets for 31 yards. He was second on the team in reception. So it wasn't a great day to be an Eagles fan. Their offense generally sucked outside of Goddard. So on the flip side of that game, I think I'm a little bit more interested on seeing a guy like Logan Thomas get 8 targets. Somebody that probably didn't go drafted in many leagues. If you're looking for, some sort of, flyer at the tight end position, as I said to you with the OBJ thing, I'm all about finding guys that are getting looked at. So 8 targets in an offense. Yeah, he only converted 4, but he found the end zone. He had 37 yards. So if he's going to start being a top 2 or 3 target guy with Washington, that's going to bump up his value as a guy who probably went undrafted.
Speaking of guys with high targets that might be slightly surprising, Paris Campbell tied T.Y. Hilton. I believe they each had 9 targets in that game. So that's someone to me to put back on the radar again, someone that was plagued with a very injury-plagued rookie season. Now he's a sophomore. That's exciting. And then I want to ask you about Russell Gage. He had the exact same amount of targets as Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, and all 3 of those receivers went for more than 100 yards. Is this sustainable? Should we all be going to get Russell Gage?
I mean, if they're going to throw the ball 54 times a game, so last year they threw the ball 50 more times than the next best team overall last year. It was an astronomical number of pass attempts. They brought in Todd Gurley, who I thought was going to be in there more for to kind of lessen the load up a little bit. He had 14 for 56, and he scored in the red zone, which I thought he was going to do. But, I mean, how do you go? 3 guys had 12 targets. All 3 of them had 9 receptions. All 3 of them went for over 100 yards. Luckily for me, I played Calvin Ridley in DFS, so I got the 2 scores.
We got the touchdowns.
So that ended up working out nicely. Yeah, I think you have to at least throw money on Gage if this is the way their offense is going to go. Do I think maybe Hayden Hurst gets more looks in this next matchup? One of the things that was highlighted, about this tight end matchup for Hayden Hurst was that the Seattle Seahawks had Jamal Adams, and Jamal Adams is a very good defender against opposing tight ends. So it seemed like he did a good job there and locked up Hurst, and that kind of opened up the rest of the receiving core. I'm not expecting cornerbacks to be able to shut down Jones and Ridley anyways, but we'll see what happens with Gage moving forward and exactly how that Falcons offense continues to improve. But I mean, they have your Cowboys this week.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm seeing a big shootout this week. Right? I was just looking, the Falcons gave up the most points to the quarterback position. I see Dak Prescott having a day. You got 3 pieces of offense there, wide receivers. You got 3 pieces on the other side. This is going to be, I imagine, I haven't looked at the Vegas totals yet, but I'm assuming very high.
I think it was 54, I want to say.
Yeah. Is it the highest? Is it the highest of the week, or
let me pull it up right here. I think it was the highest that I saw of the week. Of course, should have had this maybe up beforehand, but we're doing it now. We're doing it live. We're doing it
live. Only $4,700 on DraftKings and $5,200 on FanDuel, and he had 1 more target and 9 more yards than Michael Gallup last week. So they're not afraid to use CeeDee Lamb. So that could be a really sneaky play if you want a piece of this offense. And I'll look up. We should look up at Russell Gage's too. I think he's probably equally as affordable. So if you don't want to spend the big bucks,
cheap. So we're at 52.5. It opened at 50, so it's already on the way up there.
Wow.
And I think it's the highest, just quick scan, I think it's the highest total on the board. Baltimore, Houston is 51.5.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's about it. Yeah, that's the highest on the board right now is Atlanta, Dallas. It's going to be a tough game stack for DFS, but I mean, if you could get some cheap plays, like you said, throw in a Russell Gage, use Dak Prescott, mix in, those guys. I mean, there's going to be a lot.
Like I said, CeeDee Lamb's only 52. I'm not sure on FanDuel, 47 on DraftKings. Let's see what Russell Gage is. Do we have an easy way to look that up? FantasyAlarm.com.
Yeah, if you go type in Gage in our player search tool, you'll have both of his FanDuel, DraftKings pricing point there. So I'll pull right now. I got him at $4,800 on DraftKings, $5,400 on FanDuel.
So, yeah, Russell Gage and CeeDee Lamb, excellent plays this week if you want a piece of that offense and stack them up with Matt Ryan or Dak Prescott. Maybe don't throw in Blake Jarwin.
I wasn't really on that train anyways because there's so many other options there.
I wasn't either. I don't know what that was about.
It's tough to see him go down like that.
But it is tough to see. Yeah. All right. Well, John, we've already overstayed our welcome. It's 3:33. There's so much more we could talk about, but we'll leave it for Alarm After Hours and all the other live streams we have. We have content coming out for you guys 24/7. Remember, it's important to get your waiver claims in tonight. Think long and hard about how you want to spend your money. Be smart about it. Please don't overreact. Please don't make insulting trade offers to other teams.
Right. And don't set your lineup yet.
Don't set your lineup yet. Or if you do, fine, but you still have to recheck it. You can't set it and leave it. There are so many things that are going to happen between now and then. Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Adam Ronis and I will be here with you to help you set your lineups, make those final decisions before the Thursday game. And then again, Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Howard Bender and I will be here. In the meantime, John Impemba is pretty much always available in the chat.
Always in chat, available. On Twitter, you send me a message, I'll be there answering for you.
He will be there to help you out, and there's nobody better to help you win. All right. So for myself, for John Impemba, you guys go out and crush it. See you next time.